One morning, a farmer discovered that someone had ruined his farm, which made him very upset. He called his 3 sons and gave them the job of guarding the farm. John was the youngest son and very lazy, so his older brothers tricked him into guarding the farm alone. John agreed and stayed to watch the farm. In today's video, I'll be recapping a family/adventure film from 2021 titled Upon the Magic Roads. Before we get into the storyline, I hope you're all doing great and having an amazing day. While John looking into farm, he heard a strange voice. When he turned around, he saw a huge white horse behind him. Surprised, John tied a rope to the horse to catch it. The horse started running, dragging John along with it. After a while, the horse lost its balance and fell into a swamp. John helped the horse out of the swamp and noticed that it had tears in its eyes. The horse thanked him and left. Later, when John returned home, he heard another strange sound from the farm. He went back and found 2 horses tied up there. Then, a small horse named Foal appeared and said that his mother was happy with John for saving her and had sent the gift. John felt happy but was interrupted by his father's voice calling him. John steps outside to stop his father. After his father leaves, John sits on Foal, who begins to run at an incredible speed, and John was amazed. Foal lets out a sharp whistle, and 2 horses quickly come out. John decides to sell the horses at the market, thinking they will bring him a good price. When he arrives at the market, the people are stunned by the beauty of the horses. Many people approach John, eager to buy the horses. Foal advises him to sell them to an old man, but John insists on selling them to the king instead. When the king arrives, his minister accuses John of stealing them. Taking advantage of this claim, the king seizes the 2 horses without paying John. When John demands payment, the king ignores him and leaves. Foal scolds John, reminding him that he had advised selling the horses to the old man. But seeing John upset, Foal whistles again, and the horses return to him. The horses cause the king's carriage to tip over, dumping him into a flour sack. But the king cannot express his anger due to his royal image. Eventually, the king agrees to pay for the horses. John sets a very high price, forcing the king's advisors to suggest hiring John as a worker to avoid further trouble. The king offers John a job, and John accepts. The king's assistant then suggests assigning John bringing a firebird. The assistant believes the task is too dangerous and that John will fail, giving the king an excuse to punish him. John agrees to the challenge. When Foal hears about the task, he warns John that it is very dangerous. He explains that anyone who went in search of the firebird never returned. Despite this, John determined to complete the challenge. Foal takes John to the forest and shows him a special nut called the dream nut. Foal explains that these nuts are loved by the firebird and they make the bird fall asleep. Foal suggests using the nuts to capture the firebird is safe. Together, they scatter the nuts on the ground and wait. Soon, the firebird emerges, attracted by the smell. The bird eats the nuts and starts to faint. But before John can capture it, the firebird regains strength and begins to chase John and Foal, and the entire island catches fire. The firebird eventually captures John and Foal, but John quickly throws the last nut in front of the bird. The firebird eats the nut and faints. When it wakes up the next morning, it finds itself chained. However, when John sees the tears in the firebird's eyes, he feels sorry for it and decides to set it free. The firebird stretches its glowing wings and flies away, but before leaving, it gifts John one of its feathers, which radiates heat and light. Foal warns John that the king will not forgive him for releasing the firebird. John, however, believes the glowing feather will prove that he captured it. When John presents the feather to the king, it has lost its glow, and the king doesn't believe him. The king orders John's execution. As John is about to be punished, the firebird suddenly appears. The bird convinces the king and his court that John was telling the truth all along. The firebird's presence saves John's life. The king, forced to withdraw John's death sentence, not only spares his life but also promotes him. However, this angers the king even more. He asks his minister to come up with a new plan. The minister suggests sending John to bring back the princess from the Sar Mountains. The minister explains that if John fails, the king wins by getting rid of him. If John succeeds, the king can marry the princess. The king loves the idea and sends John on this mission. John travels to the Sar Mountains. When he arrives, he sees that the path to the castle is covered by a thick layer of ice, making it nearly impossible to break through. Just then, the firebird's feather appears, melting the ice and collapsing the wall. The sudden collapse causes a flood of water, and Foal is swept away, tumbling down the mountain like a snowball. Inside the castle, John finds many girls asleep. It's incredibly difficult to identify the true princess among them. Suddenly, the firebird's feather falls near one girl, and John realizes she is the princess. He is stunned by her beauty. John tells the princess that his king wishes to marry her. However, the princess responds that if the king is so powerful, he should have come for her himself. After After saying this, she jumps off the mountain. Without hesitation, John leaps after her, risking his own life. Foal arrives just in time, saving both John and the princess by catching them on his back. Foal notices that John is beginning to develop feelings for the princess and realizes this could lead to trouble if the king finds out. The princess secretly listens to their conversation and starts to realize she likes John as well. When they return to the king, everyone is astonished by the princess's beauty. Seeing John alive angers the king, but his minister reminding him that promoting John benefits him politically. John becomes worried about the princess's safety and sneaks off to see her. Before he can speak to her, the king's men arrive and take her away. The king proposes to the princess, but she sets a condition. She will only marry him if he retrieves her grandmother's ring, which was lost in the sea. The king becomes anxious about how to fulfill the princess's demand. At that moment, John arrives, but the king shoots him. Injured, John asks Foal about the ring. Foal doesn't know where it is, but decides to ask his mother for help. She reveals that the ring is inside a whale's belly near a small island in the sea. John sets out with Foal to retrieve the ring. When he lands, he realizes he has reached the whale. Under the sea, John sees the massive creature trapped in large chains. When John emerges from the water, Foal reveals something shocking. The entire island is actually the whale itself, just as Foal's mother had said. John asks the whale why it was chained. The whale explains that it accidentally swallowed some ships. It leads angry sailors to trap it. Now, the whale regrets its actions and wants to make apology. Feeling sorry for the whale, John comes up with a plan. He decides to help the whale sneeze to release everything including the ships. According to the plan, John climbs inside the whale's nose and tickles it. This causes the whale to sneeze, expelling the ships from its stomach. Freed from its burden, the whale happily swims back into the sea. As the whale leaves, John remembers the ring and feels disheartened. Just then, a crab appears, holding the ring. The crab explains that the whale sent it as a gift for John, knowing about his pure heart and feelings. John takes the ring and returns to the princess. When John gives the princess the ring, she realizes how much he cares for her and that he is willing to do anything for her. Meanwhile, the king's men notice something strange about Foal. One of them spies on him through a telescope and hears him talking. They alert the king about Foal. The king becomes furious when he sees Foal near the princess's window. He shoots Foal, and despite John's desperate attempt to save him, Foal is gravely injured. The king then accuses John of being the princess's kidnapper. He fires John from his position and declares that he will be executed in a few days. The princess secretly meets Foal and confesses that John is in danger because of her plan. To avoid marrying the king, she told King about a ritual bathing in 3 pots. The first pot would be filled with hot water, the second with chilled water, and the third with boiling milk. She claimed that anyone who completed this process would become young and powerful again. The king suggested testing it on John first. The princess shared her plan with Foal. She explained that placing her grandmother's ring in the first pot, a firebird's feather in the second, and life and death flowers in the third pot might protect John. Foal, still injured, asked about the flowers. The princess explained that they grew at the world's edge and were incredibly rare. Foal assured her that his speed would make the task possible. By the next morning, the pots were ready. The king announced to the crowd that he was giving John a second chance. He claimed that if John succeeded in this challenge, he would be forgiven and set free. As the king pushed John into the first pot, the princess secretly dropped her ring into the water. The ring worked its magic, allowing John to emerge unharmed and move to the second pot. The firebird hears a loud cry and flew into the second pot just in time. When John was pushed into the third pot, holding the boiling milk, everyone held their breath, waiting to see if he would survive. The princess anxiously awaited Foal's return, hoping he would arrive in time to save John. Meanwhile, Foal finally reached the life and death flowers. Before plucking one, he realized that doing so could cost him his life. Despite the danger, Foal bravely took the flower and rushed back. At the castle, everyone believed John had died in the third pot. Saddened, they began to leave. Just then, Foal appeared and threw the magical flower into the pot. Moments later, John emerged unharmed, transformed into a handsome prince. Seeing this, the greedy king jumped into the first pot, hoping to become young as well. Instead, he was trapped inside a bubble and floated away, never to be seen again. The crowd cheered with joy and declared John their new king. Grateful for his bravery and kindness, they celebrated his transformation. John and the princess then went in search of Foal, who believed he was about to die. However, the princess reassured him that the flower had only tested his courage and loyalty, and he was safe. In the final scene, John and the princess were married in a grand celebration. The story ended with everyone living happily ever after.